Good evening and welcome to UK Crime Book Club. This evening I'm delighted to be joined by Dan Malakin. I hope I've pronounced that properly.
It's pretty good.
Dan is here to talk about his latest book, which I have a proof of, which is called The Wreckage of You. It's a real page-turning, twisty psychological thriller, which we'll give you a little bit more information about, but not too much, I will say. Dan, would you like to introduce the book and yourself?
Okay, my name's Dan Malakin. I'm a crime and thriller writer. Thank you so much for your introduction, Karen. It's very nice to be chatting with you in person after our few technical difficulties, but nothing too bad. The Wreckage of Us is actually my third book. I've got a nice hardback copy here.
Nice.
The first book was The Regret, which was published by Bloodhound, and that was 4 years ago now, 5 years ago. And then the box came out 2 years ago from Viper, and this is the new book from Viper, which, as you say, is very twisty, kind of crime-ish, very twisty, crime, psychological thriller. To introduce the book, because as you probably know, because I know you speak to a lot of writers, I haven't actually looked at this book for about 3 months now. Ever since the launch, I just haven't looked at it, and I've been working on a new book. So what I'd like to, if it's okay, I'd like to actually read the blurb from the inside cover to introduce the book. Is that okay, Karen?
Absolutely fine, yes.
Because otherwise, if I try and remember what it's about, it's just going to be me going a lot. So I'll introduce the book.
Absolutely fine.
By reading the blurb. Okay. Astrid Webb is missing. The police have found her car crashed near the woods, the driver's door open, the seat spotted with blood. But there's no sign of Astrid herself, a sick woman who rarely leaves the house, who surely couldn't have left the scene of the accident without help. Her husband, Brian, is sure that she's alive. After all, this isn't the first time she's vanished, only to reappear without explanation. But as the days pass, Brian starts to look like a suspect in his wife's disappearance, perhaps her murder. Because Brian isn't telling the police the whole truth. Not about Astrid's stalker, their broken-in back door, or the threatening messages she received. And it seems as if both Astrid and Brian have something to hide. Indeed they do. Then a woman's body is found in the woods, her face terribly disfigured. By staying silent, is Brian protecting Astrid or protecting himself? That's a brief introduction, phrased much better than I can do off the top of my head. So I hope that's okay.
No, that's fine. I mean, as we said at the beginning, it's as it says on my blurb, actually my front cover, it says it's always the husband, which I think that's quite I think that's sort of quite a nice place to start, really, because actually in life and thrillers, the husband is generally will be the prime suspect, because
and with good reason, because 9 times out of 10 or something like that, it is the partner who has murdered someone. So it's a fair assumption most of the time anyway.
Yeah, and I think that sort of, when you look at real crime and sort of crime in the past, that's genuinely where people sort of look. And I guess, like you said, because it's generally women who are killed by someone who knows them, it's and like he doesn't sort of fess up, does he? He's holding something back when he's sort of talking to the police in the beginning.
Well, I mean, obviously it's very, as I found whenever I've tried to discuss Wreckage, it's very difficult to discuss it without giving anything away. But suffice to say that Brian, while being extremely worried about his wife, is also not being 100% truthful with the police when he gets interviewed, which is actually the very first chapter, really.
Yeah.
The very first chapter starts with Brian returning home from his weekly bike ride on a Saturday morning to find the police on his doorstep saying, "Come with us, there's been an incident with your wife." And he rushes off with the police and he meets the detective inspector, Ronson. See, that's I forgot the detective was called there, who immediately senses, because he's a very experienced detective, that Brian is perhaps holding something back. So there you go. That's the very start of the novel. And from there, we move between the very recent path with Astrid, his missing wife, and the build up to her disappearance, or what she's doing, or what her secrets are, I guess. And then we go back to Brian's in the moment timeline, where there's the police investigation, and he's under suspicion, and he's also, you know, trying to work out himself what happened. So Brian is in fact an ex-policeman, not a detective, more of a station sergeant, but certainly knows the ropes enough to realize that he's under suspicion, and you know, and to try and find his wife himself. So
yeah, I think it's I'm sort of interested. We'll come later on about the sort of complexities of writing it, because it is quite a complex book, isn't it? You've got a lot of things going on. So you've got the sort of the past, the present, not giving too much away, but there's various,
and the third character, the third character to lead,
view, isn't there, that which we won't give away. And when I first started reading it, I was like, okay, I'm not really sure where this is going and who this other person is. But then that's quite sort of normal, I guess, in a book. But I was interested in how you sort of wove in the three, you know, the points of view. Did you do it sort of from the outset, or did you write them?
I did it with great difficulty, if I'm honest. I mean, you know, when you're trying to juggle so many different things, you're trying to lead a reader down a certain path. Like, you know, I know where I want the reader to be at a certain point. Whether I can build the story to get them to that point is the difficult part. I knew what the ending was, because you know, every writer is different, and you know, I have full respect to some writers who just sit down in the morning, read over yesterday's work, and they just knock out 3,000 words, not without a clue where it's going, just like, oh, you know, I'll figure it out, or, you know. But I guess because of the kind of books I write, you know, not just with Wreckage, but the box as well, they are very twisty, and there's a lot of big reveals at the end. So I guess if I don't know what the reveals are at the start, then I can't really build towards them. But one of the great things about having such a great publisher as Viper and a great editorial team there is that there's always people to bounce ideas off. You know, the final draft that you see now, it isn't the first, second, third, or even fourth draft. So there was a lot of back and forth where, you know, we talk about something, or they get to a certain plot point, and there'd have to be some discussion about, you know, is this working? Is this not working? And, you know, and then hopefully when it comes to this stage, everything is all neatly fixed. You hope so anyway. I mean, there are probably a few loose ends in there. It's very difficult when you're writing that kind of book to tie everything up. But I hope I got it all tied up. But maybe you can tell me, was it all tied up in the end?
I think it was. Yeah, I think you pretty much covered everything, because, and actually I think, and more so in some ways, I thought,
and more so. Oh, wow, that's great to leave there.
I think because I sort of thought, as I always do, that I knew where it was going and was completely wrong, which is quite often my Poirot sense of detection.
Mine too. You think I'd be better at it. I read so much crime fiction, but I am constantly wrong-footed.
Yeah, I am so, like, I have the wool pulled over my eyes every time. I'm like a dream, the writer's dream, the one who's fooled by every red herring and every, you know, oh yeah, off she goes down that little path. But I really like a book that surprises me, and I know I say that a lot on here, but I do, because I don't want to guess. I like to be wrong.
Yeah, there's nothing worse.
No.
There's nothing worse than getting to that reveal, and especially the main reveal at the end. It's okay to get some little minor ones, because they're actually good in the way, because they get the reader invested. They're like, oh, I've solved part of the puzzle. That's really great when you can get them to do that. But if they can guess the big reveal on page 2, then
it's no fun.
You know, it's just going to be a disappointment or an anticlimax. So, I'm glad it kept you guessing.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there's so many things that, you know, you want to be able to, you know, I think that there's if you're surprised as a writer, I think the reader's going to be surprised as well. So I think
very much so.
Yeah. I was sort of interested in the inspiration of the sort of the premise, and I know we can't give a lot away about the premise, but just sort of what was your inspiration to write the
book? Well, I mean, the basic idea, which obviously we can't discuss because that'll give too much away, is something which has been knocking around my head for a while, because, you know, as a writer, I'm always making notes, and I'm always reading newspaper articles, and just like I'm always on the reminder feature on my phone, or the note feature on my phone, just taking notes. Even if I'm out for dinner with my wife, I'll disappear off into my own head for a few minutes, and she'll be like, "What are you doing?" I'm just writing another note. So so I've had this idea for a while, but what really brought it together for me was, there was I think I've spoken about this a few times actually, but there was the Nico bully case last year, where the woman disappears off the park bench. And I just thought it was so fascinating how, you know, someone just disappears, and in broad daylight as well, really. And what happened there was, obviously the husband became the prime suspect. If not in the police's mind, then in everyone else's mind. Everyone was thinking, oh, it's got to be the husband. It's got to be, he's bumped her off for insurance, or who knows what reason. And that's where it all kind of came together for me a bit. And as is often the case, you know, when you have you start a book, it comes like as two or three ideas kind of collide, and then you start coming with characters, and then it all kind of came together after that, I guess.
Because I think that's the thing, isn't it, with, you know, that sort of, you know, everyone's an amateur sleuth, and everybody had their opinions about, you know, about what happened, and you know, and
yes, exactly. And now with TikTok these days, and all the TikTok sleuths, it's it's difficult. Everyone's got an opinion now.
So was you're saying about the characters, so the characters are really interesting, and as you read along, you know, you find out a lot about them, and about their past, a lot about their present. So did they sort of come, you know, I know characters don't generally come fully formed, but did they sort of come as, because you have said you knew the ending, but did you know who they were going to be? Oh, excuse me.
Oof.
Oh dear.
I think. Oh, bless you. That's all right. Bless you. I think because it actually helped this time, the setting of the book in the north, because I'm from Manchester myself. I live in London now. I have done for many years, but revisiting Manchester as a setting allows me to channel my inner Mancunian and just drag all these shadows out from the past. So you know, like Brian sounds like all my dad's mates, and Celine is reminded me of like a girl I used to date when I was 18 in town. So, you know, it was just all these little memories of Manchester were coming back to me as I was writing it. And in fact, the only one that changed quite a lot was Astrid, because she is quite I try to find the right word. She's hard to pin down in the book, and she was hard to pin down in my mind as well. And she was probably the one that kind of developed the most as the book came out. You know, Brian and Celine. When I started writing them, I kind of had a good idea of at least what they had to achieve in the book. But definitely, Astrid's character is one which probably wasn't really fully formed until the later drafts by them. So
when you have the sort of process, is it difficult because you've got an idea in your head, or are you really sort of open for that discussion of, you know, we want this character to be more like this, or we want the story to be, or sometimes is it difficult and you think, well, I don't want it to go that way? Or
I like to think I'm pretty easy to work with. You know, there's a lot of my editor at Viper in this book, which I'm very grateful for, because she's a fantastic editor, Miranda at Viper. I'm sure many people know, just because get a lot of Viper proofs out there. So, you know, working with her on it was a real, you know, just fantastic to be able to do that. She's full of good ideas, and you know, maybe some of the best ideas in the book are probably her ideas. So I don't mind that, you know. And there were some, you know, not heated discussions, but some, you know, fairly forthright discussions over the course of the many edits that went through. You know, where things have to change. You know, some things aren't right. You're trying to avoid cliched characters, or you're trying to avoid, as you said, you try and look for surprises, and you know, it's quite easy, even when you spend so long working on a book, it's quite easy to miss things where, you know, a good editor will pick it up from a reader's perspective and be like, well, actually, you know, people will be expecting this. You've got to mix this up a bit more, make it a bit more just unexpected, I guess. So there's definitely a lot of that going on, and I'm always happy to get that feedback. For me, it's all about making the book as good as it can possibly be, and that's whenever I work on a book, that's my main aim, because that's all you can control about it, really. I mean, I can't control the sales of it. I can't control which bookshops stock it. I can't control any of that. The only thing I can control is to work as hard as I can on it, to get input from some really great editors, and to just try and present the best book possible when it's released, I guess.
What was you said we touched on it a bit at the beginning, but what was the sort of the most difficult part of the book? Was there a bit that that you just couldn't sort of get your head around?
Well, the first draft is always brutal, because I work full time as well. So carving out that, when you're editing a second or third draft, it's actually a little bit easier just to snatch bits of time here and there. You get half an hour here or an hour there. You could just take a page or a paragraph or even a chapter and just rework it, or just improve it, or just do whatever you need to do to try and get that more towards the final version of the chapter or whatever. But if you're writing first draft stuff, it's you kind of have to spend a certain amount of time at the start of the session getting yourself into that first draft headspace where you're just creating stuff from nothing. You're creating scenes, you're creating conflicts, got 1,000 different things in your head you're trying to keep in a place to do with, like, where you want the characters to start at the start of the chapter, where they've got to be by the end, and all that under the pressure of your own
life
issues over whether life, but just like I get even the best writer, and I know even the best writers or the most successful writers, it's not a crisis of confidence. It's more like when you're staring at a blank page, your first thought is, how am I going to fill this with anything good? And the first step to that is to fill it with something bad, or at least something adequate. You just got to fill it with something.
Words of some
words. It's just any old words, really.
A lot of hours, days.
A lot of days, and so I've got various things which I do for that. I just basically just try and almost just switch off from it and just write, just not even look at the words on the page, just write. I just try and fortunately I can touch type, which is good, very useful when you're trying not to. So I try, when I'm doing first draft, I try not even to look at the screen.
Really?
Because if I look at the screen, I'll start reading back, and I was like, what am I writing here? So I just kind of fade out almost. I just let my fingers type, and then I will, at the end of a certain amount of time, I'll look back and I'll tidy it, or I will delete it sometimes, and I'll try and get to the end of a day of a first draft with about 1,500 words, which I'm okay with. But then you've got to do this over 3 or 4 months every day, so it's tough. First draft, I find first draft tough.
I think I'm really was fascinated by the fact that you still work full time, because like having that headspace when you work full time to be able to come home or get up in the morning, or
Well, I work from home, so that's definitely. I'm not sure if I'd be able to do as much as I do with the writing if I didn't work from home, because it saves me a couple of hours travel time. So that in itself is 2 hours writing time. Plus all the rest of it. I don't have to chat to no one by the coffee machine or the water fountain, I guess, if they still have those. So my days are pretty intense insofar as I don't take any breaks, or don't take many breaks from when I start until when I stop. But I'm able to do all the work I need to do and to write as well. So I guess I've got to be happy with that, really.
Has that got harder?
Take lots of holidays.
Yeah.
Pardon?
Has it got harder? Like, was it like with book one? Was that sort of? Is it become, because I don't know if have you got sort of a deadline for your next book, or are you sort of? Is it harder now that you're published?
It's that's a very good question, actually. In some ways, it is harder because before you're published, you don't really know what's in store for you when you are published.
No.
So you've kind of got this kind of kind of love the ideal of what it's like to be published, which is just like, book launches and
Yeah.
strolling into Waterstones with your signing pen
Yeah.
and, glancing someone on the train reading your book. None of that is true. it's
That's the romantic.
so it is. It's a romantic idealization of being published, whereas the truth of being published is it's a lot of very hard work and a lot more work than before. Because before I was published, I kind of set my own schedule. Kind of, I'd kind of be working a book, and then if I took a few days off, I wouldn't give myself such a hard time. Whereas now,
No.
It's very hard because it's very competitive especially as a crime and thriller writer.
Yeah.
So the worst thing I think you can do is lose that momentum from being published. So it does kind of forces me anyway. Not everyone. I think some people are happy to kind of take a bit of a step back. But it takes me so long to write books because I do work. So some writers are happy to turn out two books a year, two very good books a year often, but for me it takes me a year to 18 months, so I don't give myself much of a let up. Whereas previously I did kind of probably take more time off. With now it's more just like head down every single day, get the work done, get the writing done. I've got a young family as well, so it's
and all those
once I finish work and writing, it's
up, poking around as well, that when you're not expecting.
Exactly. And that's it, because the fact is, when I finish work, my brain doesn't finish planning. So we'll be downstairs watching TV in an evening, and it will all still be going round, and I'll still be writing notes constantly. So yeah, but that's the life I chose, and I realize I'm incredibly lucky to have had 3 books published. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm complaining about it. I'm certainly not, but a realization that it is much harder than I probably imagined before I was published. So
we've got some hellos for people watching.
Oh, okay.
Laura, Sarah, and Caroline all saying hi. Kaz all saying hi.
Hi everyone.
So yes, I was interested about your sort of trip to being a published and why you particularly chose the sort of psychological crime thrillers sort of genre.
I guess it's just because my favorite books are the best psychological thrillers, things like Gone Girl and Before I Went to Sleep, or so books of that kind, which are kind of genre crossing or genre defining, I guess. Maybe at the time. I think that the problem is now the market is fairly diluted with a lot of books, so it is harder. It feels like it's harder to find those groundbreaking books, maybe because there's been so many psychological thrillers now. But what I like about psychological thrillers, it allows for really intense character development, and for me that's what I look for when I read a book. I look to find a character which I can engage with, which I can go along on their journey with and feel what they feel, but without actually having to go through all the horrible stuff they're going through. So if I, I mean, there's also other reasons as well. There's commercial reasons, and there's also, what my skill set is as a writer in terms of plotting and pace and dialogue. Which I think is very suited to psychological thrillers. So it's a number of things like that. It's probably the best fit for me, I'd say. And I say that having spent many years writing all different genres. In fact, I started off as a horror writer.
Oh, really?
About 20 years ago, I was writing horror short stories, and then for many years I was really set on being a sci-fi writer because when I was young, I read a lot of sci-fi. And I got quite far with that. I actually got quite a few professionally published sci-fi stories. But I couldn't see the step up to being a novelist from there because I didn't have any sci-fi novel ideas. I didn't have like high concept, or I don't have the interest in the high
Yeah.
concept ideas. Maybe you need to be a sci-fi novelist. So, but I've always loved watching crime. I grew up watching The Bill. I remember watching it when I was like 6 or 7. I'd be tuning in to watch The Bill
Yeah.
3 times a week. So I've always liked the kind of like the back room and the social aspect of the policing stuff. So
the dysfunctional,
so like the police dramas, the dysfunctional police dramas. So that's why so many of my books and other crime writers' books have always got the kind of maverick, dysfunctional policemen in there. So,
often alcoholics, aren't they? Or have them.
I know. You can't ever write an alcoholic detective anymore. Gotta be. They've got to have different vices, like they're obsessed with meditation or something. It's going to be.
Well, I quite like Ronson because he's quite sort of like, I think in quite early on in the book, isn't it? I think it's when
he's very old school.
Yeah, but when Brian meets him first, and he says about like he's scruffy, isn't he? Because he doesn't sort of fit that clean detective sort of.
I was channeling my inner Columbo definitely then, because I'm a huge Columbo fan, and I've watched every episode many times. So I'm sure it's obvious now. I've told you that he's got that kind of scruffy.
I love Columbo. I've got the box set.
Just one more thing, I really had to stop myself from having him do that in the scene. I really wanted to write a scene where he turns around and goes, just one more thing. But
I love Columbo. But watch them again.
I refrained.
I haven't watched them for ages.
Yes.
They're so good.
No, I've watched them for a long time. I think I binged them about 5 years ago. So
Oh yeah, that actually really makes sense now. Yeah, I can see that now. He's gonna now he's gonna be just he's gonna be in my head as Columbo and nobody else.
Good. I was picturing Columbo as I was writing it, so that works.
That's a good one. Did you sort of, you said about the plot, the twists, the turns, are they something that come with the editing process? I imagine they don't become fully formed. They're sort of more.
They don't, but that's mostly what I'm thinking of outside of the writing. Is how he's I'll have. I mean, we're not going to give away the big twist, but the big twist in this book was something which I had already, but is how can I make that work? And it wasn't easy, because there's a lot of kind of misdirection and a lot of sleight of hand and a lot of stuff like that. So that's generally when I'm thinking outside of my right time. That's what I'm thinking about, is how can I make various things work, and I'm trying to project myself further into the book sometimes, and trying to picture the plot holes which are coming, or so yeah, it's not something which can fully formed, but it's probably the things I spend the most time on when I'm actually working on the book, because these kind of books depend on the plot twists, and as we've already said, it's very hard to come up with something surprising these days. It's hard to come up with something even a little bit original, let alone something which is going to make a reader sit back and go, oh wow, I was not expecting that, which is great, because I've had that reaction a couple of times with this book, which is obviously just wonderful to hear.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I read a lot of crime as well, so it is, and I think, I don't think, nobody writes the same book, but there are books that are similar. But I think it's nice as a reader, and I think one of the reasons you talked about being a writer and that sort of escapism thing, and I think that's the reason we're all readers, isn't it? Because we like that sort of going into.
Well, this is why I'm a writer, because I'm a reader. I mean, I'm a reader first and foremost. Sometimes I speak to writers and they'll be like, "Oh, I just never read these days." And I'm thinking, like, what? How? Why would you do that? Isn't that the whole point?
Yeah.
It is. I love reading. If I had a choice of any form of entertainment, is what I would choose first. And there's nothing more, there's nothing better for me to hear than for a reader to say they've enjoyed my book in the same way that I enjoy other readers' books. I'm often kind of like book struck when I meet writers who I love. You know, like I met M.W. Craven at Harrogate a couple of years ago, and I went over to say hello to him, and then my mouth just went. My mind went blank. I wanted to tell him how much I love the his latest series, and I couldn't remember any of the character names. Couldn't remember any of the book names. I was just like,
hi.
Hi.
There's another one. I'm sure he's used.
Yeah, he was very nice about it though. He's very nice about it. He was like, "And who are you?" I was like, couldn't even remember who I was. But so so that's what I love. I love reading. I love chatting to readers. I love chatting to writers. So it kind of makes sense that at least for me to write. So
I was interested in your sort of the research you carry out, because obviously there's an element of the sort of police procedural in it, along with the psychological. So do you get any sort of advice on that, or is it sort of, do you research it online, or?
I've been writing crime for long enough now where I have a big kind of folder-ish. It's like a file, I guess, but it's all like done into headings and stuff.
Yeah.
Where I've got more police information, I think, than your standard Blackstone manual. I mean, so I kind of refer to that, but a lot of the police stuff is stuff which you kind of take liberties with, I guess, because no policeman probably is going to act like D.I. Ronson, I guess.
Well,
you've got to take a few liberties to make them interesting. You don't know, and maybe they're a lot worse, as we found out with all the WhatsApp groups and things like that. In recent past, so maybe there are worse. I'm very lucky as well. My cousin is actually he's quite senior in the police, and do you watch Line of Duty?
Yeah.
Have you seen that? Well, he works for the AC forces, whatever they're called.
Oh, really? What, the anti-corruption?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
The anti-corruption. He works anti-corruption. So I can't give his name, obviously.
No,
in case
obviously
he actually asked me not to give his name in the book when the acknowledgements. But so any kind of questions, like technical questions, which I'm not sure about. So in fact, one of the books I'm working on now, I had to ask, like, how would the police go to a house at night when someone's reported a murder there, and I was writing it. I was like, would they do this? Would they burst in, or would they knock on?
Yeah. So
I just dropped him a mail and said, "What's your take on this?" And thankfully, he's always very, very happy to help and offer advice. Yeah, I'm very lucky actually. I know a lot of lawyers for some reason. So
I'm not going to ask them.
anytime I've got legal questions, I have a whole team of lawyers I can ask, which is always nice. So it's actually good to have those people in research that you can just ask questions to, just give that book that kind of like little touch of authenticity, which is good, I think, for readers to have.
Yeah, I think so, and I think many authors have said that they get picked up on things that aren't right, or people will say, oh, they would never do that, or they would never have done that, but and I'm sure there are cases where that's not the case, but people do quite like to point out things, don't they?
They do, and there have been things have been pointed out to me in previous, and that's fine. You got to take it on the chin. You got to just say, I did my best to research it, but it's at the end of the day, it is entertainment.
Well, it's fiction, isn't it? I think I always say that.
It's fiction, yeah.
It's not, you're not writing a non-fiction book. It's not true crime.
Yeah, and it's like anything. My take on it is, if you get people to the end of the book without questioning too much how we've got there and enjoying the journey on the way, then I think that's a win. Because if you delve too deeply into any book, I think you're going to find a few things which maybe don't sound right, or it's a plot hole, or you're thinking, would someone really do that? And you got to just assume that people aren't going to read it that closely, because they're just reading it as well for just to.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Just because they enjoy it. Yeah. But you're right. Some people do love digging into it and finding stuff, like needle and haystack stuff, which I don't realise. So
no, I haven't. I read too much to have time to do that. I think maybe people are.
Me too.
I think people do. I think there are people that sort of read. I think
Yeah.
people read differently. I read quite quickly, which is good.
Right.
And whereas, I think some people do, sort of.
And it's actually important because you have got to be aware that when a reader is reading, they're having almost like a conversation with the book,
Yeah.
where they're a character is acting, and they're not just blindly watching the character.
No.
They're like, and they're not just putting themselves in the character's point of view. They're also questioning what the character's doing. They're like, oh, would I do that? Would they may be cheering on the character, especially if it's something like revenge. Oh, thank God you've taken revenge on that person. Or and the worst thing that any book can have is when a reader looks at the book and goes, I don't believe they're going to do that. I mean, that's a kiss of death for a book.
Yeah.
I put books down from that, just from like something just really bizarre. The characters, something like out of character with how the character's been described so far.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing you can do, because it just really pulls you out of that kind of fictive dream, and it makes the whole thing feel like an artifice rather than like a real story, which possibly could have happened.
Yeah.
Which is what you want to. I mean, you've got all these kind of little signifiers in the book, like you've got the time and the the locations and all the details of it, and these are all to kind of draw you in, to make you think, this really could have happened. This could be a true account. Part of your brain knows it's fiction, but another part of your brain is kind of reading it as if these are real people.
But you want that, don't you, as a reader? You want to be, unless you're reading something like sci-fi or fantasy, where where you're you can sort of just put that sort of belief to one side. But as a crime,
yes,
you want to be,
when it's based in realism like that, when it's based in realism like crime, you do have to have that kind of sense of could this be a true story? Almost. Almost.
Do you think your writing's changed over the 3 books? Do you think from?
That's interesting. Well, I'm always working at my writing, so it's not something which for me is like a static kind of. I've made it to a certain point, and it's all just let it run from here. I don't know. I think I wrote with a little bit more freedom certainly when I was writing the Regrets. It was I had less thoughts of, because I wasn't published. I didn't really think so much about what an editor would think about it or a reader would think about it. I was just more about making it as exciting as possible and getting as many twists in there as possible, and just kind of amping it all up, just to make it a really exciting read. But I think now I maybe have a tendency to be a bit too reserved in my writing, a bit too kind of not cautious, because it's if you're too cautious, then it's just going to be boring. But just so it's a very interesting question. I guess it's hard to know, because you only live day to day, so it's really hard to think back to how you were 5 years ago. I've got this image of myself 5 years ago as this kind of freewheeling writer, just putting anything on the page. I don't care what anyone thought, but most likely my first drafts were terrible back then, whereas now they are probably much better.
Well, that's the thing, there's that sort of learning of having that expertise that you've had through the 3 books, and I guess going into your 4th or 5th, that you're always going to have more and more knowledge of what is good, what is so I mean, I don't think anybody ever gets to the stage where their books don't need editing anymore.
You don't, but I still make a huge mistake. My agent has actually just read the opening chapters I sent to him recently, and sent them back with just this is unpublishable. So it just said the tone of it is too male skewed, and the male readership just isn't there at the moment. So it was like it was a marketing issue rather than not marketing issue, like this book isn't sellable in its current form. Even though you only read the first 4 chapters, he's like, you got to rethink the tone. So even 5 years on, I'm still making mistakes, because I thought they were good chapters, and he said they're decent chapters, just I'm not going to be able to sell this
it's
to
sort
you.
of the commercial side of it, rather than
the commercial side. And I guess that does tie in a little bit with terms of being more cautious, I guess. So I guess on like a sentence by sentence level, I'm not more cautious because you can't write that way.
No.
But in a kind of, when I'm thinking about what I want to write and what the next book should be, there's a whole separate conversation going on which probably I wasn't having before.
Yeah.
Like I don't think I would have written the box, for example, now, because the box has it's very action orientated. It has a male lead character. It has a lot of kind of very topical stuff, which I probably shy away from these days, to do
Yeah.
with like the men's rights movements and Andrew Tate-ish kind of cultish
Yeah.
behaviour. And it was all stuff which I was just very interested in. I just wanted to put in a book. Whereas now I'll be a bit like, oh, you know, will that sell? Is there a market for it?
Yeah.
You know, so I don't think I would have written the box now, I have to say.
It's interesting how it changes.
Maybe that's a shame, but yeah, maybe it's a shame because I think the box has got some fairly original ideas in there, which, yeah, like I said, I just don't think I'll do now.
But I think times change, don't they? And like, you know, we've all read books that haven't aged well. You know, and I'm thinking of like, you know, I'm thinking of like Agatha Christie, who I love, and you know, some of her books have got stuff in that's really not aged well, but you just don't know, do you? From one, you know, things move so quickly now as well that
it's true. It's very true, actually.
Yeah, what you could write that was quite innocuous, sort of like 3 years ago, could turn out to be like, oh my god, I wrote a book about this thing that's now nobody would touch it with a barge pole.
No one's going to touch it, and they're now going to be cancelled, and that's my life over. There's a little bit of that. There's definitely a little bit of that, and it's actually very interesting what you're saying about kind of things aging out, because of my IT background. The Regrets and the Box both have quite a lot of not like technical stuff, but they have technology is used a lot more. So in The Regret, the main character Rachel is being cyber stalked by someone who's using all kinds of different technological things to just destroy her life in every way possible.
Yeah.
And in the box, one of the main characters is a young hacker who is integral to, well, don't give anything away, but she's integral to the whole thing. So you're actually right. You know, those, and with the Wreckage of Us, I really wanted to move away from that because those kind of things do age very quickly.
Yeah.
And technology moves on so fast. And I know, for example, in The Regret, there's a couple of things to do with phoning banks and pretending to be someone else, which just wouldn't work anymore because everyone's got two-factor authentication where you got to get a text sent to your phone and stuff like that. So anything with technology, just 5 years later is going to be archaic. You know.
It's quite interesting because some people go to write historical books because of that, because they don't want to get involved in, you know, sort of.
It's a good idea.
The fact was and
you get a lot of.
Sorry, yeah.
Sorry, you saying?
I was going to just say with crime books, it's like, you know, it's not back in the days where, you know, like golden age crime, where, you know, you had to write a letter, you know, or someone could pick up their phone and, you know, look up and Google something, you know, they'd go and get an encyclopedia from the library that only opened 2 days a week or something. I can sort of see the attraction, but actually with your sort of job, I guess they say write what you know, so it must be quite difficult.
It did. Well, that was it, because I work with data protection, so it made, especially in writing The Regrets, it made a lot of sense to use that knowledge. You know, I understand all about hacking and phishing and getting people's details and how that can be used to, you know, turn people's friends and family against them. So yeah, it made a lot of sense. And at the time when it came out, it did feel quite current, and a lot of people, I think, enjoyed that aspect of it. I think if I was to write something like that now, I think it'd be very difficult because I'd be too aware that things change so quickly in technology, and also you don't want to be typecast as being, you know, the guy who just writes techie novels because that'll turn a lot of people off. So thankfully, well, not thankfully, but just The Wreckage of Us has very little technology in it, and Brian, who is the main character, knows very little about technology. So
I mean, I think that's
hopefully
it's a proper crime, you know, it's a proper crime sort of, you know, you've got your sort of a traditional, I guess, you've got your detective, you've got your murder, you've got your your murderer, maybe. You've got all those sort of aspects, you know, and you don't know really where it's going. You've got your dysfunctionals, which, you know, everybody loves a dysfunctional in a book.
Well, we're all dysfunctional in our own way, aren't we?
Exactly.
I guess.
So yeah, I think it's, yeah, definitely you've moved away from. So I was interested in so what's next? Can you tell us what's next?
What is next? Well, I actually have a book which I wrote last year, which Viper didn't want for various reasons, but my agent really loves. So that is a more traditional psychological thriller, where a married couple, obviously having marital problems, go to do an escape room, and the wife opens the secret door, disappears into it, screams, and isn't seen again. And that's when the book starts. So
That sounds interesting.
that's something which that one's got a lot of twists. So I'm looking at it now, because it's completely written. I'm looking to see if it could be smartened up to send out maybe at the start of the year. So that's where we are now. And the other book, which I just told you, my agent read the chapters and said it was in the work. That is still something I'm thinking about. So my plan is to refocus it towards a female readership and to start that in the new year. So there's a few things in the pipeline, as it were.
Plenty to keep you busy as well as working full time.
I have a lot to keep you busy. But the way I see it, if I wasn't doing this, then what else would I be doing? I guess, you know, it's something which I you know, when I'm actually writing it, it's just something which I enjoy more than probably anything else I do. So even though it's tiring and it's hard work and it's pretty stressful at times, you know, the benefits of what I gain from it just outweighs that, I guess.
So you said at the beginning about you know, the sort of the romanticized view of, you know, going into Waterstones with your pen and having your book launched.
Yeah.
So what is the best bit about being a published author from your point of view?
The best bit about published author is absolutely readers saying that they've enjoyed the book as much as I enjoy other people's books. That for me is just everything. Because when I read a great book, you know, I will be transported for 8 hours. You know, you can't get better value for money than that.
No.
You know, and there's nothing I love more than on a Sunday morning when breakfast is done and everyone's gone off to do their thing, and I can just sit in my chair for a couple of hours with endless coffee and just read. And I read all different books. I don't just I never just read one book. I've always got a stack of 5 or 6 books I'm dipping in and out of. You know, a novel, short stories. I love graphic novels. They're my greatest passion with books. So, you know, for me, that's what I love to do. And if I can just bring a tiny bit of that to someone else, then, you know, that's unbelievable to me. I just love that.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is that, you know, all those sort of, you know, the things that you think about, but, you know, just being able for someone to say, you know, I loved your book, or, you know, what are you writing next, or, you know, I can't wait for your next book. It must be really exciting to have that.
It is. And if I could just have that and the writing and none of the rest of it, then it will be amazing. But you know, but suddenly there's a whole swathe of marketing, PR, and you know, submissions. Submissions are the worst. You know, sending a book out and then waiting for the responses back. You know, it's stuff like that I could just happily do without. But the reading and the writing and the speaking to readers, you know, they're the best parts.
You said I read that you read a lot, and you've mentioned it as well. Have you got any favorite authors yourself? You said comic books, and is there any particulars? My husband's a big Marvel. Doesn't really do.
Okay. I don't really do Marvel. I have to say, it's more like graphic novels than the comic book side of things. But who do I like? Well, I have to give a shout out to Janice Hallett, whose new book is out this week on Thursday.
Good. Yeah, I've got that one on.
Oh, The Examiner. I read it earlier in the year. I absolutely loved it. And she's a really, really nice person as well as being a fantastic writer. So that's her book is out on Thursday, so you should buy that. Other writers I love Michael Wood's books. He's another crime writer. Did the Matilda Dark series, I think.
Yeah. Yes.
Don't get that name wrong.
Somebody will point out.
But I love his books. Well, I've read quite a few of his books now. I love his books. And aside from that, yeah, I'm not gonna list all the graphic novel writers I like, because no one will have heard of any of them. So, who else do I like? Yeah, that's it. They're the only two I can think of top of my head. But yes, go and buy their books. All both very good.
Yeah, no, I mean, Janice is amazing, and you were talking about like originality, and I think hers. I mean, that I remember when I read The Appeal, 3 years ago. Maybe?
Oh, The Appeal was fantastic. Yeah,
so
that's and I've actually just realised they are both the people who quoted the cover of my book. So I was wondering why their names appeared in my head.
You knew that it was
it's because they both quote. I just looked down and I was like, Janice, Michael. Oh, that's why. Okay, but they are both fantastic writers, aside from providing the front cover quote. So.
Yeah, no, I think as you said,
funny how the mind works, isn't it?
It is. It's like you must have just been like, I must thank them, and I'll just drop it in. But yeah, I think both.
Just drop it in.
I think she's it is difficult, like you said. It's hard to get that originality and to be able to,
She is definitely someone who is certainly at the forefront of original crime fiction.
Yeah.
Just the way she's just like constantly reinventing this epistolatory novel, which she already reinvented with The Appeal, and to keep it reinventing it with every book is just a fantastic achievement. And each one is just this amazing mixture of being incredibly smart and incredibly readable, both at the same time, which I think is pretty much as good as it gets when it comes to crime fiction.
And I read somewhere that she doesn't write, in a linear way. She writes it all over the place, which makes my head hurt even thinking about that.
Yeah, that is probably true. That is probably true. When you read her books, it does feel that kind of. But I guess her books probably lend that way, whereas mine kind of feel like the start and the end, and it's like it's a single point of tension until it's finally resolved at the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is. Oh, thank you so much for joining us this evening, Dan. For anybody who has just
my pleasure,
who's just joined us, the Wreckage of Us is out now. I've got my proof here, which I had a really cool little bit of a police report in mine. I don't think you got that.
Oh, that's it. And I don't have that, but that's from the wonderful Viper marketing team, or is it the marketing team? Yeah, but the marketing team. Who have just done such a fantastic job. The whole Viper team are just so great to work with.
They print great books.
Did a really great job of. Yeah, the Viper do print great books. I do feel very, very lucky to have had a couple of books with them, because they really do print some top quality books. So.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you everybody else for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Karen.
And
I'm so pleased you enjoyed the book.
Thank you. I did. I shall post my review, and I'll also put this will go on YouTube. So if anybody wants to watch, you can share it on your sort of socials and things. That will be good.
Fantastic.
Brilliant. Thank you, everybody.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.